So welcome to my method on how to study more efficiently. We are on step 2, which is harder is better. Overcome failure anxiety. Now in the first video, I really encouraged you to do questions first. Let's take a flashback.
Do questions first. I realize that's clapping, you're probably not hearing what I'm saying. Do questions first. That is your number one step in learning how to study efficiently.
You really have to ask, if this is so efficient, why don't students do questions first in the first place? Doing questions first hurts. It hurts your soul. When I first started doing questions first, I almost didn't last, guys. It was painful. And let me tell you why. I am a student who's used to making good scores. I am kind of a perfectionist when it comes to academics. Who isn't? All the people that are applying to medical school are perfectionists in some sick way, right? So I invested a lot of my emotions into getting things right. Doing questions first forces you to get things wrong because you don't know the material yet. And this is why students hate pop quizzes, because it hurts to get things wrong. And when you do pop quizzes, you don't know what the questions are. So you get a little nervous and you know you're gonna get things wrong, and it hurts. It hurts when you get your score back and you got a 50. It hurts when you get a 30. It hurts when you're doing U-World questions and you get zeros constantly. And that's what was happening to me. I was making zeros on my U-World test questions. It's a very unpleasant feeling. Pop quizzes mean you haven't had any time to prepare and you're likely to get lots of questions wrong. You're gonna feel like you don't know anything. But failing and feeling bad about it will actually help you get better scores. It all has to do with emotions. Our brain is really good at remembering things when it's attached to emotion. You probably remember the first time you encountered a bully, or the first time you were spanked with a chancla. In any of these situations, there was a negative emotion tied to that memory. Interestingly enough, if you feel bad when you fail a quiz question and you really tried your hardest to answer it, you're gonna remember the answer later on. This is another one of those magic principles. There is something I like to call failure anxiety, and it means you get stressed out by the very thought of failing something. Don't let that be you. And this is philosophical. It doesn't have to just do with test taking. It has to do with everything in your life. Failure is key to progress. You have to fail in order to learn how to get better. Tests are the same way. You have to fail the questions that you don't know in order to know what you don't know and then get good at it. How will you know you're not good at something unless you've tested yourself? It is amazing to me how many students will not do practice questions. Amazing. Sometimes students will even save questions till the very last day before the test. How are you supposed to get better that way? But I'm getting ahead of myself. But for now, let's focus on the emotions. You should fail. You should feel bad. You want yourself to feel stupid. That is the goal. Make yourself feel stupid by doing questions you don't know, and you will learn them faster. If you want to be good at tests, you have to be comfortable with failure. Don't take it so personally. This is just practice. You should definitely not skip over questions just because you're scared that you're not going to answer them correctly. Just try. For 30 seconds, try. Just know this, if you fail at the practice questions, you're more likely to pass at the real questions. A fear of failure is just that, a fear. It's not real. Get over your fear, do questions first, make sure that they're hard, don't skip any hard ones, and you'll do well on your exam. Now, what does this look like in real life? Look for practice questions and do them now. Don't wait. Even if you haven't heard the lecture, even if you haven't read the book, and especially if you feel scared and you're not ready, that's the prime time to do questions. Seek out the questions you know you're gonna get wrong. Seek out failure. Do it. I promise you'll get results really fast. Now you know you're doing this correctly if your brain is tired. You know you're doing this correctly if you start feeling emotionally and physically drained. When I first started changing my study methods, I was exhausted after just 10 minutes. I was exhausted after 10 minutes. In the first video, I teach you guys how I started changing all my lectures into questions. And I would recite those questions and answers every morning. I could only do 10 minutes worth of it before I had to take a break. I started getting these headaches. I didn't know where they were coming from. I'm the kind of person who never takes naps. And all of a sudden, I was needing to take a nap at 7:30 in the morning after doing just 10 minutes of these questions. It hurt my brain. Not only that, but I was getting all these questions wrong. It was hurting my soul. I felt like a failure. I felt that I was stupid, that I didn't know anything, that I was dumb, did I not listen to anything Dr. Pad said yesterday? Dr. Pad's gonna be so disappointed in me. But I was on the right track. If you don't feel emotionally or physically drained, you need to find harder questions or you need to study for a longer amount of time. The interesting thing about this and the other type of magic involved is that with this method, you actually end up studying less. That's what was wild to me. I physically could not study more than 10 minutes at a time throughout the day. All together, I probably only studied about 2 to 3 hours, and I would study 10 minutes here and I would get exhausted. After lunch, I'd study another 10 minutes and I would get exhausted. After my afternoon class, I would study again and I would get exhausted after 10 minutes. It started to worry me, actually. I was a little concerned because I wasn't studying as much as I used to. I used to be able to study 6-7 hours straight. My brain could not handle it. I was making so many crazy synapses and my brain muscle was having to work so much that I just couldn't handle it. But the magic was that at the end of the day, I was learning faster and more efficiently than I ever had before. I was retaining the answers to these questions. I was scoring really high on our practice tests. I was knowing the answers in class. At the end of the day, I scored a perfect score on my final, which I will keep saying over and over again because it's amazing. And I owe it all to working harder. People always say work smarter, not harder. This is the perfect example of that. When you study more efficiently, you can study less and still perform better. Now I have to go to an aside real quick because lots of people have discussions about saving questions. What is saving questions? Saving questions is when you find an awesome practice test and you decide that you don't want to do that practice test until the last minute because you want to save the test. You think to yourself, this test is so awesome and it's just like the real test, and everybody online says that it's going to really tell me where I'm going to be on the actual test, that I'm going to save it. I'm going to do it later. Don't save tests. Do not save tests. I'm sorry, but if anybody asks me if they should save tests, I'm going to tell them flat out no. And yet, no. Don't do it. There is absolutely no utility in saving questions for later. Saving questions for later actually tells me that you are having failure anxiety. Failure anxiety, again, is avoiding things that are hard because you don't want to fail at it. If you find a test that mimics the real test, that everyone online is saying tells you the exact score you're going to make on the test, it's going to make you feel nervous. You're going to get anxiety. You're not going to want to take that test because what if you fail it, right? That's the real test and you've failed it. You're a failure. It's terrible. I believe this is the underlying reason why people save test questions. They want to prepare first and then take the practice test. This is an example of avoiding hard things because you're scared. And let me tell you this, there are no shortage of questions. There will never be a shortage of questions. You will never run out of questions. It's not a thing. You can always make up your own questions. You can always ask your friends to make up questions. You can always ask your TA or your professor to make up questions. You can look online and there are infinite sources from which to get questions from. Now, they might not be as accurate, right? And that's going to be your argument. Oh, but those questions aren't accurate. This one test is very accurate and it's exactly going to score me like the test. Great. That is exactly the test you should be taking first. Why? Because you'll know where you're at. That test is a tool. That test has all of the answers in it. That is the best test you could study from. You need to change the way you look at these practice tests. These practice tests are not tests. They are study tools. These questions are not testing your learning. These questions are the learning. You need to completely switch gears and throw away everything you've ever known about studying, because that's not what we're doing anymore. We are going to do the questions first, and we are going to learn from the questions. If you have a practice test that you know mimics the real test, do it right now. If you get a 50% on it, if you get a 20% on it, if you get a 0 on it, great. That just gives you more material to learn from. You do every single question on that test, you learn every single principle on it, and then you know what? Next week, do the same test over again. I guarantee you, you will not remember those questions. I guarantee you, you will still get questions wrong if you repeat that test. There are no rules on repeating tests. Nobody says that you can only take a practice test once. Take it multiple times. That test will still be useful to you until you're able to get 100% on it multiple times in a row. The more times you see those questions, the more times it's gonna stick in your brain and the better you're gonna do at the real test. And some people are so concerned about memorizing questions. Oh, well, if I do this test, I'm gonna see all the questions and I'm gonna memorize them and then I'm not gonna learn. That's crazy to me. That's crazy. There's no way you're gonna remember all the questions from that test exactly and get everything right. And you know what? By saving test questions, what we're really doing is creating more time between us doing easy stuff, passive learning, and us actually doing active learning. More often than not, to prepare for the fake test, we're gonna be writing more notes, looking at more lectures, passively reading. Those things are not effective. Pushing the practice test farther away just creates the illusion that you have more time to get better. But you will only get better by doing the practice questions. So do those questions first. All you're doing by saving this practice test is trying to make yourself feel better, cushion your ego a little bit. Like I said before, being emotional about a test, getting things wrong, feeling bad about your bad scores, that'll actually help you remember things and do better. And besides, doing all those questions now will give you more time to learn from them. You do not want to be a person who saves a practice test and ultimately is too scared to take it at all. I know people that have done that. You also don't want to be that person that saves a practice test, takes it the week before the real test, and fails it. That's not going to do anything for your confidence. That's not going to do anything for your ego. You will actually feel worse having done that than having faced your fears and done this test first and learned from it. By holding off on that test, you are wasting a golden learning opportunity. In fact, the closer that practice test is to the real test, the more you want to get your hands on it. Any questions you get wrong on this practice test, you should review over and over again until you consistently get it right. You will not have time to do that if you save these questions for the last minute. Do hard questions and do not save questions for later. Doing easy questions and saving tests for later helps you avoid failure anxiety and does not help you score better on the test. Whew, I need some water, I need some chocolate, and then we will get going on our third step.